Thanks so much for having me. This talk will be a bit different from Joshua's, a little bit more high level. So I want to think about something that you've ever read, or have you ever read or seen anything that's changed your life? Now, all my life, I've actually been interested in the value of patterns, but it wasn't until 2006 that I discovered how to create value out of this interest. So what happened in 2006? Well, that's the year Hadoop was launched. And if you don't know about Hadoop, it's an open source software technology to facilitate the use of a network of many computers to solve problems involving massive amounts of data and computation. It launched what's now known as the big data era. Now, this was a fact I did not learn until 2011. And before 2006, I knew nothing about AI. That year, I just happened to read an article that changed my life because it put AI in perspective. It was fascinating to read because it showed me how powerful seemingly disconnected data sets could be used to do something that I thought was impossible. The data came from a European cell phone provider that wanted to predict if their customers planned to cancel their service. Now, not only were the researchers able to predict churn, customer churn, but they were also able to use the same data to predict where individuals would physically be at any given point in time. And they were able to use this one data set to create multiple sources of value. And this pattern prediction got me hooked in learning about AI. Now, at the time, I barely knew what AI meant. And it started my 15-year journey into the exploration of the valuable applications of AI and an education in how to implement those powerful tools. Since 2006, I've also been asking people inside and outside the space, data scientists, business leaders, and everyday people what they think AI is. The main takeaway from years of asking this question is that everyone has a different perspective on what it is. Some think it's Alexa, others think it's self-driving cars, while others think it's the Terminator. Now, these answers and 15 years of researching and applying AI has led me to understand three things. First is that because AI does not have a consistent definition, and because there are a wide variety of uses, that we need a common language around AI as a tool. Second is thinking of AI as a product does not solve challenges. You don't hire a carpenter to use a hammer. You hire the carpenter to build something. AI is a tool like the hammer. So it's important to use a framework to keep in mind that AI is a tool and focus on the problems that it's solving. To put it another way, what AI does is more important than what AI is. Third is that leveraging the power of AI can be done by understanding the tool through frameworks. And this allows us to, from whatever position we're in, from developer to CEO to leaders of nations, to use AI to solve issues, transform industries and organizations, and become more aware and engaged users of AI. Now, tools are instruments that help us solve tasks at hand. Tools are important expressions of our collective knowledge. Many examples of these exist throughout history, from fire to airplanes. And each one of these examples could be seen through the lens of the multiple applications, depending on the issue they're aiming to solve. We know airplanes enable our ability to move things or people faster from one place to another. We're trying to move, and why differentiates the tool and the particular challenges. When we look at it through this lens, AI should not be seen as a technology that can simulate human intelligence, a smart machine, or some theoretical statistical algorithm, but rather as a tool that can be used in a distinct way depending on what problem it's trying to solve. Or, as economist Theodore Lever once put it, no one wants a drill. What they want is the whole. The same thing could be said about AI. It's less about the tool than what it can do. Some people think that AI is the product. It's not. It's enabling technology that allows new products to be built. The breakthrough products will be AI first, built on these models from day one by entrepreneurs and business leaders who understand both what the models can do and what people actually want to use. So how do we change our thinking of AI as a product to AI as a tool? Well, in business, as well as sciences and other areas, humans tend to use frameworks to help guide their creations. I believe AI could be then shaped as a tool if we looked at it through a framework I call the 5 AIs: automated, assistive, analytical, accelerated, and augmented intelligence. This framework is meant to help everyone involved in the development of an AI-based solution to understand the why, when, how, and what type of AI application can be leveraged to solve a problem. So let me share with you how you can use it by starting with some examples of these 5 AIs through the lens of biotech and pharma. Now, automation or automated intelligence minimizes human intervention in a physical process, typically with machines. In biotech and pharma, automation can be applied to a whole host of operations, including clinician engagement, clinical trials, and laboratory processes. For example, using data from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, automated systems can track which doctors are performing which procedures and use that data to draw conclusions about particular therapeutics or procedures that can improve the lives of patients. In clinical trials, wearables can automatically track vitals, locations, sleep schedules in ways that are much more accurate and consistent than self-reported data. In drug discovery, robotic lab automation can be used to produce and test novel candidates by mimicking manual and labor-intensive tasks and performing repetitive tasks, often at scale that is impossible for human hands. Now, assistive intelligence means enabling mental tasks to be performed faster, including supporting cognitive tasks that would be nearly impossible without a computer, such as calculating the square root of 4,088,484. It's 2022, in case you were wondering. Now, keeping in mind what your intention or problem to solve is, helps recognizing how AI can be assistive and what tasks need to be supported. For example, at our company, Evolve, our mission is to transform how medicine is discovered and developed. With this in mind, we set out to build tools to generate drugs for diseases like cancer. Now, each potential drug we generate comes with over 3,000 data points. And what if we want to know how similar 100 drug candidates generated by a technology are? Well, if we're looking at 100 potential drug candidates, then we're generating over 300,000 data points, which is far too many for any human mind to correlate at once. And this is where assistive intelligence can come into play. Now, mathematician Clive Humbly said, data is the new oil. And like oil, in order to become valuable, data must be extracted, cleaned, and processed so it can be transformed into information. That information can then be converted into knowledge to allow individuals and organizations to take action. And that's where analytical intelligence comes in, because it offers the capability to transform data into usable and relevant knowledge. Analytical intelligence allows data to be transformed into a human interpretable format. One way to do this is to visualize the data with a pie chart, for example, which allows human experience and inference to be combined with information. Now, that combination becomes knowledge and provides the ability to make a decision. Terms such as business intelligence are examples of the conversion of data into information that allows individuals or teams to make a decision. But imagine that instead of producing 300,000 data points, we produce 80 billion data points. Now, that's much harder to visualize in a way that a human can interpret for decision-making purposes, especially beyond 3 dimensions. And this is where analytical intelligence layers can come into play, because the computer can use statistical inference and perform probabilistic analysis on the data. Analytical intelligence can convert the data into knowledge, allowing computers to make a decision in the limited scope of whatever the analytical intelligence is programmed to perform. Now, unlike business intelligence, which requires human interaction to convert information to knowledge, this conversion of data into knowledge occurs because the machine is programmed to mimic human decision-making. Now, automated, assistive, and analytical intelligence expedite various research and medical processes. Accelerated intelligence provides a way to predict outcomes through various types of modeling. At Evolve, we use accelerated intelligence for drug discovery to fail as quickly as possible and as often as in the computer, where the time and costs are low, instead of failing in the laboratory where the costs and time are high. It can also be particularly useful, accelerated intelligence, for adaptive clinical trial design, which applies Bayesian statistics to clinical trials. Now, in some cases, it can be very harmful to accelerate, especially in medicine, where moving too quickly can be a significant safety risk. Expediting clinical trials harbors the inherent risk, including side effects and toxicity, to name a couple. In such cases, accelerated intelligence can potentially measure and predict whether a drug will be toxic in certain states, potentially limiting clinical study failures. It's the predictive power of accelerated intelligence that could determine the duration of preclinical and clinical trials, identify novel and pre-validated drug candidates, and facilitate the removal of therapeutic candidates that might otherwise have received significant time, funding, and resources. Automated, assistive, analytical, and accelerated intelligence are meant to augment human behavior. A calculator, which is a form of assistive intelligence, is augmenting the ability to add, subtract, multiply, divide. The calculator mimics human intelligence and makes the person better at something they already know how to do. When a radiologist is augmented by automated highlighting of a tumor in a scan, it allows time to engage in additional critical activities. Google provides easy access to information, augmenting an individual's ability to sift through vast amounts of information. If we consider automated, assistive, analytical, and accelerated intelligence together, then we can begin to see how augmented intelligence can support the advancement of individuals, organizations, or methods. Now, understanding AI through these 5 AI frameworks allows you to leverage the power of AI from the position of where you are. If you're a data scientist, it'll help you become a better data scientist by building tools that can solve real problems. If you're a business leader, by using the framework, you can see how to leverage the power of the tool to transform your organization. And if you're interested in AI, then thinking about it through the lens can help you understand the impact on your life and help you become more engaged. So now that we have a common framework to understand AI as a tool that can automate, analyze, accelerate, assist, and augment, we can now start to begin to solve challenges. And when looking at a problem or an opportunity, the question is about whether we can and should automate. Think of the times you received automated robocalls about an expired car warranty. And there's an example where automation should not be used. Or how about whether it's or not it's dangerous to accelerate? In medicine, for example, as I mentioned earlier, moving too quickly can be a significant safety risk. Expediting clinical trials harbors the inherent risks associated with side effects and toxicity. Whether we're actually assisting or making, we also need to think about whether we're actually assisting or making things worse. There are legitimate concerns that there's definitely a dumbing down when it comes to the ability to spell as a result of autocomplete. But in healthcare, autocomplete could be a game changer for doctors who are burning out because of, among other things, inputting data into clinical records. This is why it's so important to understand and apply AI in an important way. So how do you decide where to apply AI? Well, there's natural steps that can lead you to apply AI. The initial step comes from understanding needs and pain points, and then defining and prioritizing an outcome. A very common use case in healthcare, AI and radiology, may help you think through the process and how and what to apply AI to. In radiology, there are a whole host of pain points. Radiological scans like X-rays or CTs are some of the most common diagnostic tools in medicine, meaning that lots of them are created. So there's definitely a need for those who can read the scans. There's also a need to prioritize which scans to read. There's a need because of the shortage of radiologists worldwide. So it would seem that finding a way to automate the reading and analyzing of scans to help prioritize could alleviate some of this pain to understand where and what to apply AI to. We need to understand the pain points and the needs. And so thinking of AI as a tool and having a framework to get you there, I'd love to share what many companies that have leveraged AI through a whole host of needs and applications in pharma and biotech. To start, I want to frame the potential applications through sickness and health. Generally, when people see a doctor, it's because they're sick. When they have a checkup or they change their diet, they're taking actions for their health. So it's important to acknowledge that most of what's happening in pharma and biotech is not for healthcare. It's for sick care. So one question to ask when thinking about the AI you build and could be building Is this helping people who are sick, or is it helping keeping people from becoming sick? If you're using AI for drug discovery, then you're helping people who are sick. And if you're building AI that leverages wearables data to improve sleep, then you're helping people stay healthy. Now, also, what's the difference between a biotech and a pharma? Generally speaking, biotechs are research and development companies that help shepherd molecules through the process of becoming a drug. They do things like early discovery work, animal testing, and human testing in clinical trials. Pharmaceutical companies are generally manufacturing and selling approved pharmaceuticals. They participate in running human testing, but most often in later stages, the drug is getting closer to patients. So there are a whole host of stages that a drug has to go through to get from being a concept to being a medicine that a doctor prescribes. And the first stage is target identification. Now, only close to 400 genes are proven for US FDA-approved drugs. 80% of human genes are unexplored as targets, and some are considered undruggable. Target discovery is the process that scientists use to identify a unique location in the body that is targetable for the development of a drug molecule. In the case of COVID, for example, this was the spike protein. Now, there are thousands of possible targets in the human body. The identification and selection of novel drug targets have remained major challenges in drug discovery, as the identification of a molecular target requires assessment of genomics, proteomics, and other omics, both in vitro and in vivo experimental data interpretation. The challenge lies in the lack of technology to break down complex biological networks and map them thoroughly. Data mining, which combines analytical and assistive intelligence, particularly in bioinformatics, can be used to identify, select, and prioritize potential disease targets. Genetic association studies can help scientists identify genes associated with a particular disease. This method studies the DNA of large groups of people, searching for small variations. Each study can look at thousands or millions of variations at the same time and identify those that occur more frequently in people with a certain disease. If those variations are associated with the disease, researchers can now point to genes that may be associated with the disease that can be tested. This combines analytical, assistive, and augmented intelligence. And these types of variations have been used to identify conditions ranging from heart disease and Parkinson's disease to diabetes. They can also be associated with a person's response to medicine to predict more accurately which treatment strategies will work in particular groups, which leads us to precision medicine. Now, if we know a relevant target, then we can begin to use all 5 of the AIs and apply them to drug discovery. And this is where novel, relevant chemical or biological agents are identified and evaluated through a series of lab and early animal studies to determine their effect on cells and tissues to model the impact on a disease. This is a long and arduous process involving generating and identifying compounds. Machine learning is being used to generate predictive models for a range of physical and biological endpoints. Generative models are able to extract patterns from massive databases and use this information for the design of novel molecules. Now, over the past few years, there's been a drastic increase in biological data creation. In fact, the number 3 fastest growing data source in the world is biological data. However, this varied creation of data presents challenges in acquiring, cleaning, and applying that knowledge to answer complex biological questions. At Evolve, this is where our efforts are focused. We leverage advances in computation and massive data sets to teach computers to generate novel therapeutic antibodies. 7 of the top 20 selling drugs in the world are antibodies, and there are 2 main goals for new drugs. The first is getting to clinical trials, and the second is getting through clinical trials. Now, just getting to clinical trials fails 90% of the time and can take up to 5 years. And much of this starts with modeling immune systems, which prior to machine learning was done in an animal or in a vial. Now, at Evolve, the immune system is in the computer, which allows us to search our database of target relevant antibodies. But we go further because it's not just generating antibodies that's a challenge. Scientists need to ensure those antibodies can become drugs. So what does that mean? Well, if, for example, an antibody is not stable at 98 degrees Fahrenheit or 37 degrees Celsius, then it won't be stable in the human body because that's the temperature of the human body. So how do you know how to do that? or if you can't manufacture the antibody at scale, then you can't get it to market. And so the question is, how do you model things like thermostability or manufacturability? And how do you know if your models are working? These are the types of questions that we attempt to answer every day at Evolve. One of the other challenges comes from training and testing. Just because the models tell you something is going to bind to a target or be manufacturable, how do you prove it? Scientists are some of the most skeptical people on the planet, and this is where lab testing comes in. But unless like running a trained test split in the cloud, it's not so simple or inexpensive to do the same in the lab. In the case of the antibodies, for example, each antibody created costs about $1,000 to test, and labor is intensive, taking 6 to 12 months. Imagine running models, and to run your test, you need $1 million and 6 months. I assume that this is what it was like building machine learning models in the 1990s. But this is also where automated intelligence can come into play, because over time, as synthetic biology labs reach scale, we'll begin to see the costs come down. Despite these challenges, the value of computational approaches is a way to reduce the search space. At Evolve, we use our modeling techniques to reduce possible therapeutic antibody candidates from 10 to the 10th down to 10 to the 5th. Now, once a molecule has been discovered, the preclinical phase of drug discovery takes shape, and it involves extensive safety evaluations of the potential therapeutic intervention, often using cell and animal models of diseases. Now, because we're testing in animals, a review of the pathology of the disease commonly includes going through a large number of histopathological studies. This contributes to the drug development process being time-consuming and labor-intensive for pharmaceuticals companies and contract research organizations. Preclinical studies can involve very difficult analysis tasks that need to be repeated over and over and over again, which is time-consuming and costly. Now, when detecting vague and unclear targets, as is commonly the case in histopathology, the risk of intra-observer variation and subjectivity increases. These targets often need to be detected in huge amounts of data, leading the work to be split among several pathologists and scientists, also increasing the risk of inter-observer variation. Analytical and automated intelligence increases not only the speed, but the precision and accuracy of the review of the samples. With AI-powered image analysis, the risk of all these can be minimized, as the AI model can be trained to detect even the slightest variation and changes with high consistency and high reproducibility of results. Validation research results is another section in preclinical studies that can benefit from AI. Scientific validations requires objective evidence that the models for obtaining results are robust, reliable, and reproducible. A well-trained AI model is exactly this. Using models in preclinical studies can not only significantly improve and accelerate preclinical study workflows, but also standardize analysis, help find hard-to-find spots, and give important visual feedback that helps interpreting current and future results. Now let's talk about clinical studies, a step in the drug development pipeline that averages 5 to 7 years. This timeline is due to the traditional flow of data across the clinical trial lifecycle, which can become a complicated maze of manual effort, rework, and inefficiency. As one life sciences executive summed up, we still use the same processes that we used over 50 years ago. It feels like it's 1972. Not 2022. So what are some of the technologies that can speed and improve clinical trials? Well, from a patient engagement perspective, let me share with you 2 examples. First, automated intelligence powering wearable devices can lessen the need for participants in clinical trials to travel to a physical site, which can enable organizations to recruit patients and diversify clinical trial participation. Second, and not too distant, is remote patient monitoring, which allows patients to participate in clinical trials with fewer potential hassles. Automated and analytical intelligence algorithms can be used to understand individual patient behaviors or needs, resulting in more patient-centric interactions and better retention. Now, one of the most interesting use cases is computational clinical trials. The process involves running a simulating clinical trial to model what would occur during clinical experiment, similar to what we do at Evolve for drug discovery. This process holds the promise of decreasing the time and cost of testing the safety and efficacy assessment of clinical trials. It could also reduce the need for animal and human testing. Part of a digital clinical trial involves generating digital replicas of a patient or groups of patients based upon diverse scientific and clinical sources called digital twins. Digital twins have potential to represent the complex and dynamic relations within biological networks. Digital twins could give us a deeper understanding of biology and be used as an accelerated framework to better target patient populations and design better drugs. And we don't need to create a whole new person, a whole new digital person, as we can start smaller, creating digital twins of organs. The liver is a key organ in the body that is implicated in various diseases, and liver toxicity is actually a leading cause of drug failures. A digital twin of the liver could be used to predict drug toxicity. This can be done by integrating various liver functions, diseases, and the effects of drugs using assistive and analytical intelligence. In studies, these digital twins of the liver have been effective in reproducing the impact of treatments. AI-enabled data collection and digital twins are just two of a myriad of ways to manage and accelerate the clinical trial process and help get new treatments to patients more quickly. Now, it's important to remember that as much as those developing AI would like to see these advances be adopted quickly and widely, regulatory frameworks around new pharmaceutical inventions are necessary constraints on the speed of adoption. Regulations exist to protect patients, but we should not allow these constraints to stifle our vision. It may be 100 years away or less, but you can imagine a future where you walk into a doctor's office and rather than being prescribed a medicine that is sitting on a shelf at a pharmacy, a medicine is created on site just for you. And this is why it's so important to start imagining what the future should look like. Take the time to imagine what the world should look like. Custom designed medicines may be 100 years away, but we need to start on the path there. Dream big and focus on success. If the vision is 100 years away, then imagine what needs to happen in 10 years. Work your way backwards. Ask yourself, what can I do today to help make that vision a reality? Find or start a company that is working to make that vision a reality. Take what you imagine would happen in 10 years and try to accomplish it in 6 months. You likely won't get there, but you'll definitely be a lot closer. Let me share one warning though. 500,000 years ago, humans began to use fire. The control of fire changed the course of human evolution. Similarly, like humans were with fire 500,000 years ago, we are at the dawn of AI. And like fire, it has the potential to change humanity as we know it. But like early man's use of fire, AI requires great care and motivation to make it useful. It's in your hands to make it destructive or beneficial to humanity. I urge you to be passionate, inspired, thoughtful, careful, and considerate of the AI, whichever of the 5 you choose to build. Dream big and prepare yourself for an exciting new world. Thank you.
Andrew, thank you for your speech. It's been great. Easy listening. We have several questions. So the first one is, where do you see agent-based models as digital twins in clinical studies? This question is from Andrew.
Where do you see
agent-based models as digital twins in clinical studies?
Yeah, so this is actually not my area of expertise. I have researched into this space quite a bit. I think in the near term, what's going to happen is that, so before you actually go into clinical trial, you actually need to design a protocol for that clinical trial. And what we'll likely see in the near term is digital twins being leveraged for clinical trial design. not as substitutes in clinical trials. This will be a way to optimize and fail in the computer using digital twins. It could also be used for patient stratification. So you can make variations of different types of patient cohorts using digital twins. And what I mean by cohorts would be, for example, separating digital twins by sex, by race, by genetic makeup. And those will be potentially used to start creating patient stratification in things like adaptive clinical trials. Adaptive clinical trials most clinical trials are frequentist in nature. If you're familiar with frequentist and Bayesian statistics, until 2012, we didn't really see all clinical trials were frequentist in nature. So you can potentially see digital twins being used in adaptive clinical trials, which are basically Bayesian clinical trials, to understand when you're collecting data through the clinical trial itself, as the drug is being tested in clinical trials, collect that data about the patients and the response, and use that to stratify patients into the next cohort. So as you're moving through the clinical trial design. Hopefully that answers your question.
I hope that you have answered the question. So we are moving for another one. How do you get data for feeding your ML models?
Sure. So right now, as I mentioned earlier, the third largest growing data set in the world is biological data. And this has really been driven by the Human Genome Project and the sequencing data. So for our models, we use a host of public data, usually UniRef, UniProt. You can find those data sets online. Also, we license data from universities to make sure that we have our own proprietary data sets. And then the other side of the data is the data that's generated from the lab. So we use the data to train the models, but in order to make the models continuously learn, because it's machine learning, not machine doing, we take the data from the labs, from those molecules that we generate, and use it as a feedback loop into our system so we can get better and better drugs for that particular target. One of the things that we're not quite there yet, at least with antibodies, is being able to associate function. So the way that I describe drug function is its ability to not only hit the target, but have an impact on the target, right? Because it's not just so simple as, landing a punch. You want to be able to make that punch impactful. And so we're not quite there yet with function and understanding how specific drugs impact a particular function. There are PPI data sets, protein-protein interaction data sets, that are being used to narrow that information down. But we as an industry aren't quite there yet in being able to link a drug to its particular function. And so when we get that testing data back from the lab that allows us to understand that function, we can feed that information back into our models to say, if we have, let's say, 100 drugs that are not functional and 10 that are functional, we can say, be more like these and less like those, using the modeling techniques that we do. And we're also generating data ourselves. So we have, you can augment your data set and continuously generate more data that allows you to make your model smarter. You may have seen this in radiology, where they may modify a scan or flip it. So hopefully that helps to answer the question.
Definitely, yes. Thank you a lot. We're actually a bit off of the schedule, but nothing terrible has happened. Thank you a lot for the presentation, for your answers. I see that we have answered Andrew's question, and the second one also has been answered. So thank you a lot, and I hope to see you soon.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you, everybody.